Machal Devangan, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all to the Editors Guild of India's Rajendra Mathur Memorial Lecture 2025. As we begin, I request everyone to kindly settle down and ensure that your phones are on silent. This annual lecture honors Rajendra Mathur, the esteemed editor of Navbharat Times, and has been a platform for critical discussions on journalism and its future. Tonight, we reflect on the evolving relationship between media, technology, and business issues shaping the press today. We are honored to have Mr. Uday Shankar, co-founder of Bodhi Tree System and vice chairperson of GeoStar, as our speaker. A journalist turned media leader, he brings invaluable insights into these challenges. To share more about our distinguished speaker and today's program, I am pleased to invite the President of Editors Guild of India and editor of the Caravan magazine, Mr. Anant Nath. Mr. Nath, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Anchal. Good evening, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, members of EGI, distinguished friends. On behalf of the Guild, it is my pleasure to welcome everyone to today's event, a resumption of annual Guild tradition, the Rajendra Mathur Memorial Lecture. The last lecture was organized in 2019 by the Honorable then President Shri Pranab Mukherjee. It is both a privilege and necessity to come together to reflect on the state of journalism that we live in. We are gathered here under shadows of a profound crisis, perhaps the gravest we have seen ever. Journalism, which has long been a pillar of democracy and guardian of truth, is now under siege from multiple fronts, from an insular government, new emerging technologies, dominance of platforms and how they govern the way we consume news and content, the shrinking business model of news itself, and perhaps the one that is most inward-looking for us journalists and editors, the eroding standards of ethics in journalism, and equally worse, the way journalism has perhaps become subservient to the cause of nationalism. These are issues that Guild has been taking up in its activities, statements, reports, programs, and some other forum, some of which we hope to touch today. But before that, a few words on the institution of Guild itself. The Guild, as many of you may know, was established in 1978 with the primary objective of safeguarding press freedom and enhancing standards of editorial leadership within the country's newspapers and magazines. The inception of Guild was a direct response to challenges faced during emergency when press freedom was severely controlled. Eminent editors, led by Sri Kuldeep Nayyar, of that era recognized the absence of a unified forum to advocate for journalistic rights, leading to the formation of Guild as a bastion for free and responsible journalism. The mission of Guild encompasses several key areas: protection of journalists' rights and safety, defense of freedom of speech, elevation of journalistic standards, and being an ethical anchor. The Guild does that by various means, the most obvious being issuing statements to raise awareness, build pressure on establishment, and most importantly, as an act of solidarity to those under attack. The Guild regularly takes up matters judicially when all doors are closed. It makes representations to governments, and often we commission fact-finding missions and research reports, and then programs and seminars. Since the inception, Guild has been at the forefront of defending press freedom. In late 70s, soon after it was formed, it campaigned for restoration of press freedom that was suppressed during the emergency. In the 1980s, the Guild opposed draconian defamation laws proposed by the governments of Tamil Nadu and Bihar. A significant victory was achieved in 86 when nationwide protests by the Guild resulted in central government withdrawing a proposed anti-defamation act that threatened journalistic freedom. In early 2000s, the Guild resisted provisions of the Prevention of Terrorism Ordinance that allowed for the preventive detention of journalists based on mere suspicion. Recently, the Guild has continued its proactive role in addressing challenges to press freedom. On judicial intervention, we have had some considerable success. On the matter of fact-checking unit, many of you will remember the Ministry of Information Technology had introduced IT Rules 2021, and later on, amendment to the rules in 2023, wherein they set up a fact-checking unit with the sole authority to decide what is fake, misleading, and false pertaining to government's own affairs, and with sweeping powers to order content takedown. It was nothing less than a censorship move. This came at a time when various other state governments were also drawing up fact-checking units, and it almost looked imminent that the government will be the sole arbiter of what is false and what is not. The Guild, along with various other entities, approached the Bombay High Court, and after a long-drawn court battle, the court finally held the fact-checking unit unconstitutional. It has set a strong precedent because we know the government is again trying to reignite the debate on controlling, most specifically, the online news, online space. They set up a parliamentary committee to look into the question of the fake news, and they're trying to bring forth the agenda again. But the Bombay High Court judgment is a strong precedence. Another judicial intervention has been on the side of criminal laws. Any investigative journalist, independent journalist, or editor will know how criminal laws in the country are used very widely to harass and intimidate journalists. Unfortunately, the IPC gives enough and more provisions. One such provision was the sedition law, which was used very frequently against journalists to book them in, for even the most basic journalistic duty of critiquing the government. The Guild, again, along with a set of other entities, approached the Supreme Court, and after, again, a long-drawn battle, the court put the law in abeyance and asked the government to reformulate their view on sedition. It was a victory, but unfortunately, it has been a short-lived victory. BNS has reintroduced sedition under the name of treason and made it even far more wide and far more draconian. However, we have a good precedence from Supreme Court, and we hope to reignite and retake this issue with the Supreme Court. The Guild also approached the Supreme Court for inquiry into Pegasus, and a technical committee was formed. A report has been submitted. Unfortunately, the government of India did not cooperate with the technical committee, and therefore, their findings have not been conclusive. However, this issue remains important for us. On the fact-finding mission, the Guild commissioned 2 fact-finding mission reports in the last 2 years. One was to investigate the way journalists were being harassed in the Tripura. A 3-member fact-finding committee went in 2021 and came up with some scathing report on the way Tripura police and government was intimidating some journalists. Later on in 2023, at the height of ethnic violence in Manipur, of all institutions, the Indian Army wrote to the Guild, alleging that the dominant media in the valley has been serving a very biased and a polarized version of the events. The Guild sent a 3-member fact-finding mission, which corroborated the allegations of the Indian Army. The fact that the report was met with widespread criticism from within Manipur. A lot of criminal cases were filed against the previous president, Seema Mustafa, and the members of the fact-finding mission validated our concerns. We approached the Supreme Court, and fortunately, the Supreme Court has given the Guild members protection against any coercive action, and whatever criminal cases were filed against the Guild members have been closed down. But, however, there are 2 criminal defamation cases still going on. Beyond this, the Guild has been making representations, most recently on the broadcast bill, which threatened to again create a very wide-ranging censorship mechanism, because the powers of the government, the MIB, as per the broadcast bill, would have been extremely vague and subject to wide interpretation, and not just for content on broadcast media, but it would have also brought in content that independent journalists, content creators make on YouTube, Twitter, and so on and so forth. The Guild was again part of many organizations which was opposing the broadcast bill, and fortunately, the broadcast bill so far has been put under abeyance. Through these endeavors, the Guild remains steadfast in its commitment to fostering a free, fair, and responsible press, recognizing that such a press is indispensable to health and vibrancy of India's democracy. Now, coming back to topic at hand and challenges under which journalism is operating. As I mentioned, there are challenges from across the spectrum. We all know that. New technologies, particularly AI, are rewriting the rules of how information is created and disseminated. Algorithms now decide what people read, often at the cost of rigorous journalism. The business of journalism itself is shrinking. Once reliable revenue streams of advertising and subscriptions are being eroded by the growing dominance of digital platforms. Large technology companies, which neither create nor verify content, have become the biggest beneficiaries of news consumption. They aggregate, distribute, and monetize content without without bearing the cost of reporting or accountability. The result, media houses struggle to survive, investigative journalism is shrinking, and an ecosystem built on public trust is being replaced by one designed for algorithmic engagement. At the same time, the landscape in India presents additional and unique challenges because of government regulation. Each passing year, we have seen an increasing effort to control news through laws, surveillance mechanisms, and content takedowns. Free space is definitely under crossroads. And more so because journalism has to resist the temptation of being an arm, a collaborator of control narrative of the government, which sadly, quite a bit of media perhaps has become. In this backdrop, what does the future hold? And more importantly, how do we reclaim this ground? To help us answer these pressing questions, we have with us today a man who has seen journalism and media business from all sides. Mr. Uday Shankar's journey is nothing short of remarkable. He began as a journalist reporting on stories from ground before stepping into television, where he revolutionized news broadcasting. Shankar began his career in journalism as a reporter in Patna with Times of India, covering news at ground level. His keen editorial instincts and understanding of storytelling soon led him to television, where he played a pivotal role in shaping the news broadcasting industry. He first made his mark as the head of Aaj Tak, with Mr. Puri here, and where he transformed the channel into India's most watched Hindi news platform. Later, he joined Star India as CEO of News Business, where he led Star News during its early years as pioneering 24/7 news channel. And it was his transition to leading the entire Star India network that truly cemented him as a visionary leader for the industry. Under his leadership, Star India expanded beyond traditional television, launching Hotstar, one of India's first and most successful streaming platforms. He was instrumental in transforming Star's portfolio during driving investments in sports broadcasting, including setting up of the Kabaddi League, and later securing rights for the IPL, which became a defining moment for the Indian sports and media industry. Later on, as president of Walt Disney Asia Pacific and chairman of Star and Disney India, he spearheaded some of the biggest deals in Indian media history, cementing the company's dominance across genres. In 2021, Shankar co-founded Bodhi Tree Systems with James Murdoch, a media and investment venture that aims to shape the future of digital media and entertainment. In 2024, he was appointed the vice chairperson of JioStar, the entity born out of the merger of Walt Disney Star India and Reliance's Viacom 18, where he is at the helm of what is poised to be India's largest and most powerful media conglomerate, spanning television, digital, sports, and entertainment. Shankar's career is a testament to his ability to adapt, innovate, and lead the media industry through transformative changes. He has built and sealed business at every stage of India's media evolution, from print to television to digital streaming, while also recognizing the shifting power structures that technology has brought to the business of news and content. His journey from being a reporter to leading a global media empire gives him an unparalleled perspective on how journalism has changed and where it is headed. And so we ask, how does journalism survive in an era where newsrooms shrink, platforms control distribution, and AI-generated content threatens news production? How do we ensure that independent media remains financially viable when the biggest share of revenues goes to big tech? How do we preserve free speech in a country where regulatory constraints on digital journalism are mounting by the day? These are questions we must address if journalism is to have a future. And these are the questions we look forward to hearing Mr. Shankar's views on. But before we invite him to speak, I want to take a moment to reflect on the tradition that brings us together. For close to 30 years, the Guild has been organizing the Rajendra Mathur Memorial Lecture in honor of one of India's most distinguished journalists, the former editor of Navbharat Times. Mr. Mathur was a fearless journalist, a sharp analyst, and a champion of free speech. His commitment to truth and ability to dissect complex issues with clarity and depth made him one of the most respected voices in Indian journalism. Over the years, this lecture has featured some of the most distinguished thinkers and leaders of our time. Today, we continue this tradition with Mr. Uday Shankar, a journalist turned a global media leader, whose journey reflects the full arc of media industry's transformation over the past 3 decades. We seek to hear from the rich experiences from being a reporter in Patna to an environmental journalist for a magazine, to a newsman in TV, and all the way where he is, his insights into the future of journalism, media economics, digital innovation, as we confront the urgent challenges before us. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to invite a distinguished speaker, Mr. Uday Shankar, to the stage.
Thank you, Anant. Distinguished guests. It's indeed a matter of honor that I've been invited to speak before the Guild. When I was just starting out in journalism as a trainee, I used to hear of the names, the eminent names that helmed the Guild back then. And once in a while, when we ran into them in the corridors of newspapers and magazines, we whispered their names to our colleagues. So it's indeed a privilege to be here to speak to this group. I'm not a speaker. I'm a practitioner, and as Anant in his very charitable introduction had said, I have been doing different things, but looking back is not something that comes very naturally to me. So to today's subject of reflections on journalism and its future, I'll share my journey and I'll share my experiences, and through that perhaps I'll be able to tell you how I have navigated some of those challenges and how I see about some of the future issues that the industry faces. Anand said that journalism faces a crisis today. I think that's a bit of an understatement. I think journalism as we know, or as we would like it to be, is dead. The question is, who killed journalism? And the reason I say this is, one, to be provocative, but also to recognize the fact that journalism, the way we have all been brought or trained to think of it, just does not exist, because the space for that does not exist. The world changed, and journalism, either the craft of it or the business of it, refused to change at the same pace. And that's the real problem. In my view, it was the world's most successful and powerful business of intermediation between what you wanted to see and what you could not, and where you could not be. Who you wanted to be and who you could not be. The journalists were the link. They were the critical link. And in ways big and small. A cricket match was happening at Lord's. You could not be there, so the journalist brought you the match. And you could, describe the match 24 hours or 12 hours later, and you were very excited to read every word. And you read it again and again. And there was an earthquake in South America. You didn't know about it, but the journalist described. And then the world changed. The cricket matches started getting telecast. The news started coming on, with the help of technology. The news started coming well before a journalist could go to the newspaper or to the TV channel and describe it. And we both started as news providers and news consumers. Suddenly came a time when we both started going to the same sources, namely the internet. Somebody was, Steve Jobs came with this remarkable introduction of cameras in a cell phone, and suddenly everybody who had a cell phone became a cameraman or camerawoman or a journalist. And instead of innovating and finding a solution for this fundamental crisis of disintermediation, journalists started to go to the same sources that the ordinary people had access to. So journalists started going to the Twitter or started going to Facebook or other such sources. Well, everybody could go there. And so the power that we had as journalists became severely undermined. I remember two instances. When I was a trainee at Times of India, I went to Patna as an intern at the Times of India. It was a big day for me. And my editor was a very, was a maverick, but an amazing teacher. On my day 2 or 3, he sent me to cover a press conference of none other than the then Chief Minister of Bihar, Bhagwat Jha Azad. I was on cloud 9. Here I was not even a journalist, I was a trainee. Times of India was very clear that it couldn't be trainee journalist, we were just trainees. And I was sent to cover this press conference. And I reached there a few minutes late because it took me some time to even figure out how to get to the Chief Minister's house. And there were a bunch of journalists sitting, and the Chief Minister was there. I went and introduced myself, and Bhagavat Jha said, "Now the media has arrived. We can start." Suddenly, I grew 6 inches tall. And then, just to mark my presence, I started asking a few questions. They must have been dumb back then, but he was very engaged. And at the end of it, I came back to the office. When the press conference got over, he asked me to stay back. He asked me a few questions, etc., etc. And I came back to the office. The editor, late Sumanto Sen, he was the resident editor of Times of India, Patna. He asked me how it went. I said, very good. He asked me what I thought of the man. I said, very smart, focused, intelligent. He said, so, did he compliment you on your questions? I said, yes, he did. He said, so, at the end of the press conference, did he ask you to stay back? I said, yes, he did. He said, did he offer you coffee or tea? Did he offer to get you dropped? I said, yes, he did. How do you know all this? He said, because if I had sent my dog instead of you with the Times of India card, he would have behaved exactly the same way. Things changed very quickly. I went back to Patna to report as a reporter, and I did something very, very soon after, reported something that Mr. Azad did not like, and he was livid. He was furious. And he said, I should not, he called and he screamed and he said, I should not allow you to enter my office. I said, all right, then you shouldn't. He said, unfortunately, my boss starts his day with your goddamn paper. So I have no choice. I have to suffer you. And that was the power of it. The rulers and the ruled, the bosses and the minions, everybody read what we wrote, what we reported. And that world changed, and we refused to change. We continued to do the same thing. A very senior leader in Delhi, who's no more sadly, and most of us liked him a lot. He once told me, this was soon after the Facebook came in, and he said, my life has changed because of Facebook. And he didn't look like the social media type, so I asked him what happened. And he said, earlier I had to talk to your lot for like 30 minutes, call them and be nice to them and talk to them, and then I would get 2 sentences in. And half of them will be the wrong ones, the ones that I exactly did not want to be printed. Now I don't talk to them. I just write everything on Facebook and post it. That was the fundamental crisis of journalism that came about, and unfortunately, this happened over a long period of time. The world was changing. And journalists and journalism refused to change. We receded further and further in our ivory towers. So it's a conceptual crisis. I don't think we should dismiss it by talking about politicians. They're all part of the problem. Politicians, governments, institutions, establishment. I think there is a much bigger problem. The intermediaries are no longer as valuable as they once used to be because technology has disintermediated the whole process of communication flow. So that's the first big problem. The other problem is that with all of this, as the world was changing, journalists refused to even adapt to technology. I remember when I first joined the Times of India, a reasonably senior journalist, mid-level person, one of those news editor types, we all liked him. He was, in our view back then, he was very competent. And one day he quit and he said he wanted to join some much smaller regional publication. And I asked him what happened. And he said, all these computer and internet, I can't handle. I don't trust any of this. And at this rate, I just love the pen. I want to write with my pen. And I do not want to edit or write on a computer. And that reluctance to change has cost us very dearly. I remember when my former boss, Arun Puri, wanted to launch India's first live news channel, Aaj Tak. He was very focused on building a world-class technology setup. really high quality technology. And Aaj Tak, for those of you who may not have noticed, Aaj Tak back then was probably one of the most advanced news stations in the world in terms of technology, anywhere in the world. It was truly the first paperless office in this country. There was not a piece of paper. But the journalists were the ones who, instead of welcoming the power that technology was putting at their hands, the journalists were the ones who were most miffed. One of the biggest jobs that I had was to convince them that it isn't such a bad idea to learn how to write on a computer, or to just build the rundown or the stack of stories, not on a piece of paper, but on a software. And that reluctance to change has cost us dearly, because what we don't realize that technology succeeds in every society at every time only when there is a need for that. The society has a broader need for that. So the pressure keeps building, and one day it completely collapsed. So the same journalists who were so reluctant to change, suddenly came the innovation called OB-WAN. Nobody remembers them now, they have become obsolete, but they were considered more exotic than the space-link satellites back then. Aaj Tak did not start, there were no OB-WANs, so Aaj Tak did not have OB-WANs. Suddenly a bunch of new news channels arrived, and there was this very advanced technology of connecting your pictures directly to the newsroom through satellite. Because the entire news environment had no idea, had not engaged deeply to deal with technology, how to leverage it in order to make your proposition more compelling, more powerful, and serve the consumer or reader or viewer better, they just collapsed. And I think, in my view, I don't know what the other friends from TV think. I think OB-WANs or satellite trucks have been have had one of the most devastating effects on the business, on the idea of news journalism and news delivery. Because suddenly the entire editorial judgment became irrelevant. Suddenly the logistics manager became much more powerful than the editor. The speed with which you could deploy a satellite truck at a location and link up with the satellite and start sending the picture became far more important than deciding what was useful for your reader or for your viewers, and what was relevant for the society, and what was the value addition you were going to do. So a satellite truck gets there, you link up, the message comes, oh, OB-WAN is connected. And the anchor, the editors had been marginalized in the process. The anchor became marginalized because the anchor had only one role to say. तो आप बताइए वहाँ क्या माहौल है? And the mahal journalism took over. And after some time, it started with one satellite truck, and then 3 satellite trucks, and 4 satellite trucks. And everybody was describing the same mahal. Every anchor was asking the same question. And suddenly, the brand distinction, and brand is a word that journalists hate, but the brand distinction or the uniqueness of the masthead or of the news brand became completely irrelevant. Everybody was doing the same thing. So the viewers became completely indifferent to it. So the proposition that you listened to someone or you read someone because of the unique value that they were adding had gone missing completely. Newspaper or broadsheet or magazine owners mostly suddenly realized, why send journalists to the location? Just watch TV and start reporting. The journalists stopped going there, and everything began to look the same. So the viewers felt, or the readers felt, there was no value in any of this. As a result of that, there was no loyalty to anything. No one came to, with a few exceptions, no one came to read anyone in particular or listen to anyone in particular. And all this time, the institution of the editor and the journalists were completely oblivious to this. it just became a race to the bottom. And where there was no distinction, because there was no unique value that was added, this whole thing became a reach game. And I'll talk about that reach game a little later. That who had greater reach? When I launched Aaj Tak, for at least first year or 2 years, I didn't even know there was such a thing called ratings, because I didn't need to. The impact of what Aaj Tak delivered was visible. You got a few politicians to call and complain, you got a few viewers to call and compliment, and that was it. We were happy. And then suddenly came reach. Everybody started measuring reach. Back then the ratings used to come on Friday or Saturday. And suddenly, the newsroom started dreading reach. And then innovation came in exploring which story will give us better reach. So a kid had fallen in a ditch, sad as it wasn't national news. But every OB-WAN deployed there and started reporting that for hours. And that's all that happened. Everybody is reporting the same thing. So reach was the only premium that you were going to get from. And there were these managers. What do I say about them? There is a lot of talk about quality of journalists and quality of journalism. Unfortunately, no one, even in the newsroom, talks about the quality of the managers. I don't know, Arun, I've often wondered, you built the most exciting and glorious pipeline of editors, but you also built, let's not go further. I now, because of my 30 years in media, in different roles, including business roles and association with global companies, I've had the opportunity to see managers from different countries and from all sectors of business and industry. I think, as a rule, the worst quality of managers exist in Indian media, and whose only qualification seems to be ignorance. And on the one hand, the journalists were refusing to change, and journalists have this funny habit. They all want good money, but they don't want to talk about money for the company. So they live in this make-believe world somehow that you should get a lot of money, regardless of whether the company makes a lot of money or not. And if you participate in helping the company make money, somehow that's a betrayal to the cause of journalism. When I first became a CEO, all my journalistic colleagues, who were very loyal to me, suddenly started looking at me as if I had become a turncoat. But this hostility between journalists as a community and managers became so dysfunctional that there was no real effort to explore the solution out of the crisis, the financial, technological, and credibility crisis that the media as an industry was facing. And that completely, that has continued since then. So the only thing you could do was to keep pushing reach and keep looking for stories that would deliver reach, and it became a race to the bottom. And the most damaging thing that came out of that was advertising became the biggest source of revenue. And advertisers don't care about quality. Advertisers don't care about anything. They care about reach. How many people have seen their advertising? They don't come to you for content. They come to you for the number of people who are watching or reading. And in that environment, and I think one of the worst things that has happened to Indian media particularly is this disproportionate dependence on advertising revenue. It started as an innovation in the 80s by the leading newspaper groups, and then the managers who came out of those newspaper groups, they believed in the same philosophy, and they just introduced a push towards more and more advertising. And as a result of that, pleasing the advertiser and creating content of the kind that the advertisers would pay for became the dominant norm. So entertainment story. They were not even good stories, but they just describe the faces that people would be drawn to. And there was no attempt to build a direct relationship with the reader or the viewer. The subscription prices for newspapers were grossly reduced. In some cases, from what I understand, even the cost of the newsprint wasn't recovered from the individual reader because primary vehicle was advertising. In TV, the same thing happened. I think one of the landmark moments in news was when Aaj Tak seriously considered, I think in 2002 or 3, seriously considered going pay. And I believe that if Aaj Tak had gone pay at that time, it would have changed the course of television journalism in this country. Because Aaj Tak had the clout and the unique position to build a direct relationship with the viewers and get paid for it. That did not happen, and as a result of that, because Aaj Tak was the leader, everybody else followed. Until today, news industry, which globally, in the US and in every other part of the world, television news industry, which survives on the basis of subscription income, in India has to depend entirely on advertising. And when it depends on advertising, it just cannot compete with entertainment, drama, sports. So it gets the long tail of advertising at really discounted values. And that has put economic pressure on that. And I think journalists have been responsible for that because they have never found it respectable or honorable to sit and engage and explore and ideate on the business models. The whole world, whichever industry is doing well, even in media, has innovated on monetization models, except for the business of journalism. And that's a huge crisis. If we don't solve that, I think there is a big problem. I think there are opportunities to do that. The other problem is the talent crisis that we are facing. Journalism was a huge beneficiary of a small economy, underdeveloped country that India was. Because if you did not study engineering, medicine, did not qualify for the civil services, there were really no job options for you. So no matter how good a student you were, either by design or by accident, you ended up studying political science, history, philosophy, literature. There were no career options for you in the 80s and 70s. So journalism got really good minds, intelligent people. You could either become a teacher somewhere or you become a journalist. So a lot of people came in. And then as the economy grew and expanded, those people began to have many other opportunities. So the quality of supply in journalism came down. And that has played a big role. So you're in a situation where the quality of leadership in management and quality of leadership in content, both is under pressure. And that did play a very big role. And I think continuously over the years, because good talent draws good talent, bad talent draws bad talent. That's been my experience. So continuously over the years, worse talent has been coming in because better talent has found better opportunities. And finally, the crisis of capital. Indian news industry is one of the least capitalized industry. The business of news is not a cheap and chirpy business. It requires, you have to compete with technology, you have to attract best talent. As I was just saying, good talent can go and work anywhere else. We need to pay well. Suddenly when television revolution started, and again led by Arun Puri, his journalists were well paid. So it attracted a lot of good people. You could lead a decent life. You could never be rich as a journalist, but you could live a good life. That came under pressure because the margins and the economics of journalism was coming under pressure. And this whole restriction on foreign direct investment in media, I've always found it ironical that the same editors who pontificated about ways to open up foreign direct investment for India were very, very firm on the fact that foreign direct investment could not be allowed in the media sector. And you can see the difference today. Sectors that, non-news media sectors, whether it is sports or entertainment, movies, etc., where foreign capital has come in a world where more and more businesses and more providers of capital were looking at India with interest, the sectors of journalism were completely blocked out. They still remain blocked out. So money wasn't available either to get better talent or to invest just to grow or to invest in technology, etc. So increasingly, the only conversation was, let's cut costs. Let's cut costs. And beyond a point, that cutting of costs has destroyed the vitals of life in journalism. And unless we have to look back at these things. If I remember correctly, it was a 1948 resolution of the cabinet that blocked foreign direct investment in news, and that still exists. The global news business hasn't suffered. Global capital hasn't suffered because of that. Indian news business, Indian consumers, Indian societies have suffered. And now it's at a stage where the only source of capital is Indian corporate capital of various kinds. And there is such a direct conflict of interest there that it's tough to maintain those Chinese walls. So I think these, to my mind, have been, it's a collection of factors, and we've all contributed to that. And the fact that journalists haven't taken responsibility for building an economically viable business and have somehow felt that it's been the business of, it's the responsibility of owners and managers to worry about business while they will be running the country, has put us in a sad situation where they are neither running the country nor are they running the company. And that's the real crisis. I really don't think there are any easy answers because the world has changed. The content that we can create and that we have now got used to creating is already available all around us. So there's no reason for anyone to come to a publication, to a news channel or a newspaper, to seek out that content and pay premium value for that. We need to find solutions for that. We need to, and then there are some other factors. I always feel that in a country where 65% of the population is under 35 years of age, 65% of the newsrooms are almost 65 years of age. How do you, at least in the leadership positions, if you're not young and if you're not innovating with technology, it's tough to keep in step. Sometimes, no offense to this group, but sometimes the demographic in the news business reminds me of the demographic in the films business in Hindi. The same sort of people are just going around. They refuse to make way for the others. And you see what's happening to both the industries. Harsh words, but I think that is the reality. So now the second phase of this is even more critical. There is this whole train called AI is coming at us. It's already coming. We have to decide whether we board the train or we get run over by it. And that's going to be not easy. It just can't. We need to invest. We need to be thoughtful about it, and we need to design a new content paradigm that people will find valuable. We cannot be reporting the same thing and talking about the same things and expect people to be excited about it. Now everybody has a point of view. So first it was reporting the event, which got overtaken because technology made it much faster and democratic for everyone. And then it became opinion, and opinion just became, opinion makers realized that no matter how friendly they were, all their opinion every day would not find a place. So they decided to directly, they disintermediated the media platforms and started going directly. So every politician, every leader, every celebrity is tweeting the whole time because they realized that we took their photos, we took their videos and put it. They said, Why waste time and why give them so much importance? We can start posting it ourselves, and that's where we are. So now we are competing with the source directly. Earlier, the source depended on us. Now, source doesn't need us. So we need to find paradigms. I think the only example I can give you is what's happening in the world of non-news entertainment in India and globally. I think look at the amounts of investment that have gone on. It's easy to say that the world of non-news or entertainment is rich and makes a lot of money, but look at the amount of investments that have gone into that. Anant referred to my crazy investments in cricket, but in the absence of those investments, we would not have been able to build the kind of sports ecosystem that India sees today. And if we hadn't invested in cricket, we would not have the resources to invest in kabaddi and in football and in badminton and in many other sports that are not profitable yet. But the margins of cricket allow you to invest in other businesses. Similarly, whether it is drama and films, somebody has to fund it, and people will fund it only when it's a robust business. Journalists need to wake up to the fact that they are essentially responsible for building a robust business. Being in denial about the realities of the business will deny you the existence someday. So I think that is where the crisis is. I still think the challenge is, the good news is that the average readers, average viewers' desire to consume content is growing disproportionately. The amount of time, all data suggests that the amount of time people are spending on content is growing in this country and everywhere else. And in this country, in the remotest parts, there is an increasing amount of time being spent on content. Whether we can muscle our way, whether we can sneak our way into that space is a factor of just creativity and strategy. And I think there is a need to do that. I still remain very hopeful about it. Journalism, as I said in the beginning, as we want it to, or as we have always wanted it to be or thought it to be, is dead. Let's not cry over that. But is a rebirth possible? I think it is possible. In the same way that many industries, even in the media sector, there was a time when the films business was totally dead. And now you can see this. A film made in south of India conquers the whole of Hindi world. A film like Pushpa is a blockbuster hit in a place called Patna because they have used creativity, innovation, technology, and capital to excite, to create a wider audience, to excite and engage a much larger group of people. We have, over the years, consistently narrowed down the space in which we operate and in which we proposition. I think that needs to change, and that change can only happen from the journalists, because journalists are not cost center, which is something I always used to hear and used to annoy me in no end. Journalists are the ones who create the product. Journalists are the reason that people look at a screen or look at a newspaper or look at a magazine. Instead of feeling frustrated about it, I think time has come for journalists to take charge and innovate the content model, and then follow that through with innovations in monetization models. I'll just give you one example. If somebody can create a product called Angry Birds, I'm sure many of you have seen this, and make billions of dollars. If somebody can do virtual farming as a game and every day sell buckets of water and seed and fertilizer and virtual pesticides, all of it, and literally make billions of dollars from the same consumer, it's just because of the power of innovation. Because they have innovated and found different ways of finding engagement. I don't think news has done a great job. I don't agree with everything that they write, but I like the fact that the level of innovation that I see in the New York Times. They've created this whole thing of spelling bee, which is a major driver of revenue, whether it is cookery or spelling bee or or stuff like that. They, they have one of the most insightful things that I find there is this whole thing called wire cutter that they do. It is they just review consumer products. It could very easily slip into the domain of paid journalism, but it is not, because they have maintained their journalistic standards. They assess, they're very transparent, and they tell you, you want to buy a kettle. We will review 10 kettles, and we will tell you the best kettles on various parameters, and we'll make money from that. But it's all transparent, and the standards of rigorous examination of facts and conclusions, not opinions, conclusions and inferences based on those facts will be offered to you, and the society values that. That's what we see from there. So I think there is a hope. But what we are creating today, all of that in print and in visual form can be created by the AI models. And those AI models are growing at a speed that's scary. So we need to stay ahead of that and, innovate on the models of our product and offering and build credibility at a time when the world is so short of credibility. The most premium currency, I think, for media can be credibility. We know that we can't report on everything because some of it is too uncomfortable for a lot of people. But what we report must be credible. Lack of credibility in that is what is killing the value in this business. Thank you.
We'll have a small question answer session. Can we have the mics? Thank you, Uday. We'll just have a small Q&A session with the audience. Thank you. Thank you, Uday. I thought I'll start with some questions, but because there are enough hands out there, so maybe we'll start with the audience first, and then I'll step in whenever the opportunity is there. While asking the question, just quickly, if you could just let us know who you are. Ayush, if you could.
Hi, I'm Ayush Soni. I'm a communications consultant based in Delhi. Really enjoyed your lecture, and I agree with a lot of the points you've made. The question I wanted to ask is this: how much do you think institutional rigidity or resistance is responsible for the lack of innovation in the Indian news media business, especially when it comes to legacy media?
So I don't know exactly what you mean by institutional rigidity, but people who are part of the institution.
Yeah, basically what I meant was because legacy institutions have a certain perception of themselves, and they think that if we innovate a certain way, that perception will get smashed or it will get diluted. Do you think at some level that is responsible for the lack of innovation that we see?
I think that must be one of the reasons. I really don't know exactly why the innovation is not happening, but yes, rigidity for sure is one of those reasons.
If you could ask the next question. Rishabh, can you pass the mic there? Identify yourself.
Hi, I'm Sharve. I'm a journalist at medianama.com. Thank you for your talk. I just had a question. So you talked a bit about journalists or news organizations being disintermediated, as you said. I was wondering if you'd care to comment on the newer intermediaries that have popped up, because I noticed you didn't mention that. So something like Google, for example. So that could be about, say, the revenue sharing agreements from advertising on digital news platforms, or the court case that is going on right now about AI scraping and things like that. So I wanted to know basically what your thoughts are on these newer intermediaries.
Look, I just call them the newer intermediaries. They are smarter, they have the power of technology, and they have the scale of the platform and traffic. So they're taking advantage of that. Whether that's fair or not, we all know that may not be fair. But I have learned one thing, that you can either keep resisting change, or you can find your own innovative ways to benefit from that change. I think news organizations the world over were very happily participating and putting their content on these platforms. And now those platforms have become so powerful that the news organizations are struggling. That was the only way this story was going to play out.
Okay, Uday, one question. When we look at the Indian context, and if we look at the number of big newspapers, I'm talking about the print newspapers right now, in any state, you have the number one paper and a number two paper, and then the gap between that and the next one, it falls dramatically. There was a time when it was far more democratized, there were far more players. Similar experience we've seen in US, where whilst New York Times has sort of transformed itself digitally, and we've seen, they've reached some 10 million subscribers and maybe even more. But at the same time, there has been a demise of a local news is the biggest sort of cry out there. Now, the dynamics in both the countries are, I think, quite different. Here, I think the big newspapers who've been able to sort of, create a far bigger infrastructure at the back of a lot of advertising, a lot of state-sponsored advertising, and often at the expense of maybe the other players and pushing them out, which is not the case in the US. But the effect is that, for so-called independent journalism to thrive, the larger the organization that becomes, especially in the Indian context, we know from clear evidence, the more difficult it is for you to be independent. And therefore, the onus only falls on the small independent publications or independent news creator. Now, there also, I think Ravish was here, but I think I can't see him. Ravish is a success story who's been able to sort of create an independent channel. But how many other such other such independent players are there? Is independent journalism within the shifting technologies, the way the rights are being sort of managed between big tech and original content creators? Is there any simple solution that one can give to a small independent publication house, independent news creator, to find a viable way where they are not dependent on government, because government will not give you money if you're critical to them, where they probably cannot even reach out to advertisers because they don't have the wherewithal, and where the consumer actually is may or may not subscribe to them. I mean, that subscription model, we talk about subscription model, but how easy and how viable it is for enough players to find a niche for them?
So it's not easy, first of all. And it's a strangely contradictory situation where the way that technology works and the way the scale of the platforms work, it's tough to ignore them. But it's also the same technology that's made very easy, or that's made it possible for a outlier to go viral. You talked about Ravish. There won't be many Ravishes by definition. But a Ravish could not have been successful in the absence of the platforms that exist today. The question is, how important does the society consider what you're offering? And somewhere there is that unique, that secret sauce that the likes, a few people are able to bring in, and that goes there. But the trick, in my view, is to leverage that and build your own mechanism of sustenance rather than being dependent on the platforms. Because eventually, the platform goal and your individual goals might come into conflict. And it's not easy, as you said, building subscription, but building subscription is not just the monetization model. Of course, the value is in the money that you get. But it's a very direct, very disintermediated and distributed relationship with your end consumer. And the value of that, to my mind, I have always been a very big believer in the power of establishing direct relationship with the person who has to decide the value of your product. So I think it will always be a struggle for independent niche publications or media houses to succeed. But given the availability of technology and how rapidly the prices of access to technology are falling, it's today is a better time than ever. Question is, can you create a proposition and quickly establish a direct relationship with your consumer?
Okay, start from Mahesh here.
Can I ask one?
Please go ahead.
Uday, I enjoyed your talk. You specially mentioned about New York Times as having done some kind of innovation there. If it comes to India, will you single out any specific one newspaper or two newspapers which have done some degree of innovation to make their brand distinct from the rest of the others?
Newspapers, first of all, I don't want to get into trouble. And two, the truth is, no name really jumps to mind.
Mahesh.
My name is Mahesh Jone, and right now I'm working as an independent journalist. Uday, you spoke about many crises that Indian journalism or journalism as a profession is faced with. So but I wonder, there is, you see, you spoke about technology and all that. And what about the credibility crisis that right now Indian journalism is facing? What your thought on it? Because Indian media space has been taken over by Godi media, as you may be much aware of that. Thank you very much.
Look, there will always be difference of views. And I think, I don't, everybody has contributed and worked towards the undermining of the credibility of media. It would be unfair to blame one set or the other. And if you want to talk about freedom of expression, if you want to talk about democracy, all points of view must have equal chance of or equal opportunity to express themselves. The problem is not that there is a certain kind of media which is very close to the power centers. The alternative media hasn't found a proposition that is acceptable or that the viewers or the readers are attracted towards. Some amount of soul searching needs to be done. That why is, if one side of the media is so unacceptable, why is it so acceptable to the rest of to a large part of the society? And why is the alternative not able to stand on its feet? Hello? What would you say? Why is it not? I have no idea. There is the lack of innovation, the lack of credibility is cutting equally on both sides, I would say, sir.
Uday ji, because Rajendra Mathur also started with modern technology, with modern machines and all, in Nai Dunya also. That's why I'm asking, rural area par, how you think rural market India का आज की सिचुएशन में जहाँ पर लिटरेसी बढ़ रही है, टेलीविज़न भी बढ़ रहा है, उसको लेकर के न्यूज़ मीडिया और इवन इंक्लूडिंग अदर मीडिया ऑल्सो, जिसको आप कह सकते हैं, दूरदर्शन ने भी अपना कृषि चैनल वगैरह निकाला लेकिन वो फ्लॉप हो गया. सो हाउ यू फील दी रियल मार्केट वहाँ भी है कि नहीं है, और उसके लिए कुछ हुआ है आपको ऐसा लगता है? दूसरा, जो टीनेजर्स हैं, यंग जनरेशन ऑल्सो कमिंग विद द मीडिया, बट टीनेजर्स के लिए क्या, बिकॉज नाउ यू आर इन ए न्यू वेंचर्स ऑल्सो, हाउ यू आर थिंकिंग दैट फॉर टीनेजर्स वी डोंट हैव like in Korean or Japanese or Chinese and number of other countries, how you think and visualize for the future for the rural market and for the teenagers, because they are just getting outside foreign content available in India. दो ऐसे पॉइंट है जिसमें आगे जो टेक्नोलॉजी में न्यूज़ एंड ऑल्सो इन द एंटरटेनमेंट टू सम एक्सटेंट, हाउ यू थिंक फॉर फ्यूचर?
आलोक जी, पहले तो हमको ये नहीं मान लेना चाहिए कि जो रूरल एरियाज़ में हैं या टीनेजर्स हैं उनके लिए कंटेंट नहीं है. वो जो कंटेंट जो जोग्राफिकली डिवाइडेड कंटेंट बाउंड्रीज थी वो तो ख़त्म हो गई हैं, तो उनको सब कुछ मिल जाता है जो वो चाहते हैं. ये बात ज़रूर है कि हम शायद नहीं उनको दे रहे हैं, तो अगर हम नहीं दे रहे हैं तो वो कहीं और से ढूंढ के ले रहे हैं, वो इंटरनेट पे जा रहे हैं, वो अपना कंटेंट देख रहे हैं. एंड टुडे we see data, my business of entertainment, we see data, whether it is sports or entertainment, drama, movies, etc. This level of content appetite I have never seen in history. जितना गाँव में देखा जा रहा है आज की तारीख में, जितना स्पोर्ट्स देखा जा रहा है, लाइव स्पोर्ट्स डिजिटल मोबाइल की वजह से और डेटा अवेलेबिलिटी की वजह से, या एंटरटेनमेंट देखा जा रहा है, या फिर सोशल मीडिया का जो कंजम्पशन है, उसमें न्यूज़ भी है, नॉन न्यूज़ है, तो लोग तो देख रहे हैं. प्रॉब्लम इज़ कि जो फॉर्मल मीडिया है, that has not been able to create paradigms to participate and benefit from that.
You were talking about data. One question, both on the news part and the non-news part. It's, we can admit this very clearly that much of the large news organizations are working under a very adverse government pressure. As a result, we're not able to see true independent journalism often with mainstream media. However, and this is something I think Vanita and one of her, Khandekar Kohli had written in one of her columns, that the electorate, about 40% of them is voting for the government in power, 60% is not voting for them. And they are looking at a counter viewpoint. Even those who are voting for them are, not all of them are happy with the kind of state of affairs of journalism, and they're also looking for a counter viewpoint. Are they getting, is their appetite, because we're talking about appetite, purely from a data point of view, the appetite of a very large cross-section of electorate, of citizenry, which looks for a critical assessment of the government, is not being met. Similarly, in the non-news, in the entertainment business, there again there's a pressure of promoting the kind of films and serials and programming which doesn't talk about social issues which might be uncomfortable to the government in power. As a result, mythology has been greatly promoted in the last 10, 15 years, one could say. We have kind of movies which take up a nationalistic cause. Therefore, the non-news entertainment content that would have really stuck at societal problems and irrespective of politics is perhaps not being produced as much as one would have said in 1970s and 80s and earlier on. But there's an appetite because, and naturally there has to be an appetite. So when the data says, and I would presume, and I actually want to know whether the data actually shows that appetite of a very large section of audience is probably not being fulfilled. And does it leave a big gap? Now, whether a big organization like yours can fulfill it or not, that's a different question. But is there an appetite which is not being fulfilled?
So first of all, Anant, I don't know whether there is that appetite. And, it's a presumption, and I'm sure there would be. There are some people, and under no circumstances can you fully satisfy the requirements of all segments of population or even one segment of population. There's some amount of dissatisfaction. Let me just go to the first part of it. Whenever we talk about journalism, and this is another controversial point I'd like to make. Whenever we talk about journalism, we immediately go to political journalism. And let's not talk about political journalism for a moment. Let's assume that everything that is being said about pressures and all of those things about political. Let's talk about non-political journalism, in which the state and powerful people have no interest. If political authority was the reason for destroying all of it, all of credibility and quality in journalism, then non-political journalism should have been of very high quality in this country. Now, my question is, I always struggle that, I do not get to read even a very, say one or two exceptions. I don't get to read a very high quality piece even on cricket. And I presume that no political authority or administrative authority is dictating how to report on cricket. So where does, what is the problem, where does that crisis come from? What's the source of that?
Can I give a short answer? I'm sure it will become a long debate, but I think this is my personal view that political establishment in this country, even with all its ills, is the easiest one to report upon, because the moment you go to sports, especially cricket, correct, the establishment there is far more ferocious, far more vindictive. Yes. In any kind of criticism. You go to entertainment, it's controlled by such few people that they will disenfranchise you, and you lose the access, you lose. So I feel actually, and business, even more so, because they will cut off your advertising. So I actually feel, even with all the ills, the political establishment has a much thicker skin.
But then, you're absolutely right. I couldn't agree more with you. But then that is the role of journalism, that you go and you find ways to still unearth and research and report. I'll give you an example. When I was working with Star News, we did some critical reporting on cricket. And a very powerful political figure was then the boss of cricket. And we did, it was the standard stuff, team selection was not good, players were not responsible, the usual stuff that news people would report on. And the cricket establishment, and this is 15 years ago, no, actually more than that, almost 20 years ago. So the cricket establishment did not take kindly to it. And our teams would not be allowed inside the cricket BCCI press conferences. And we were thrown out. And then we had a huge problem. I was CEO, but I also the editor, and my team. If you didn't report on cricket and a cricket tournament was happening, it left a huge gap. So then we innovated. We decided that, okay, here is the BCCI event happening or a cricket match happening, and we were not allowed to, even at the ground, our cameras were not allowed. So we just set up our cameras across the road from the stadium. And we started creating our own shows. We created a show which became very popular called Match Ke Mujrim. And we did not take any support from the cricket establishment. And we were able to create something, and it was a very successful show. After some time, then, a truce happened and we were being allowed to report and cover. So all I'm saying is that, first of all, I don't agree that people in authority in the past have been very benign, and today they are not. I think lack of benignness and authoritarianism comes from authority. The word comes from authority. So I think I have always experienced that. You have to, you cannot complain that I'm not being allowed to report and research. You have to find ways to do that. And then you have to tactically identify areas where, it's a question of building your relationship with your viewer, or reader, and providing material that the reader finds of value. Can we talk about that or not? I mean, I can understand that a film star or a producer or director may not give you an interview. But what prevents us from doing a informed and engaging review? That nothing prevents us. But somehow I find that generally the quality of content has been undermined, is getting undermined. And that is happening primarily because we are not investing enough and we are not innovating enough.
Amrita, you had a question?
Hello.
Hello, sir. I'm Amrita Singh. I'm a journalist with The Caravan. My question was a little similar to what Anant also said, but basically, I mean, the thing is that it's like a large opinion among like a lot of journalists here, not here, but like generally, is that like, a lot of the mainstream media that you see has an ideological tilt, which is very similar to that of which complements the ruling party at this point of time. And you also have a lot of takers of that kind of content. And I'm speaking like strictly of political journalism at this point of time. And there are independent publications, there are independent news creators who are sort of trying to do like honest political journalism, go on the ground, get material. But like the idea of reach here is like, I mean, how do you do that, right? If you see that there is a majority sentiment for a particular ideology, how do you reach out to them as independent publications? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
So, Amrita, I'm not sure I fully understood your question, but if I did, who decides that just because they are independent, their work is honest and valuable for the society? Honesty itself can't be the only qualification you can have. What do you do with that honesty is important. And if you're not a good creator, I mean, I've seen there are a lot of films that are successful and made by very small producers. I just gave you the example of this film, a lot of films from South in the last few years, who nobody has heard of, nobody has promoted those films, and those films have taken the country by storm because it was good work, and it was good work as judged by the people who watch movies and who want to pay for and watch the movie. We cannot just decide that, okay, just because this person is disagreeing, this person is also doing the right work or is capable. Dissent is very valuable for every society, but dissent by itself can't be the only reason for your existence.
Question here.
Thank you. Actually, part of what I wanted to ask has already been said by the previous caravan person. So actually, I have two small questions. First is that in this era of technology, and you said that media needs to innovate, news media needs to innovate, and they need to infuse the technology and embrace this demographic dividend, bring in young people. But at the same time, like we have seen in other sectors of the economy, like whether it is education or healthcare, the openness or liberalization or open to capital and investment, it doesn't necessarily bring in quality. Though it may be, you may increase your reach and may be commercially successful, but at the end of the day, it may not bring in quality. Like we say that there are art movies, good movies, and they fail. They are good movies. There is art for the masses, and there is commercial movies are for the masses, and art movies are for the classes. So how to balance the commercial interest with the quality? You may be commercially successful, you may make money, but at the same time, the content may not be of very high quality. So quality takes a hit when market forces determine each and everything. So it is not necessary that market forces or the profitability motive may bring in quality. And secondly, you said that there is a pro-establishment and anti-establishment media. It is banded always, HT and TY, they were always supposed to be pro-establishment, whether it is any government, they are with the government or any party. So now, today also, we are living in a very polarized time. Mainstream media is divided. Either it is branded Godi media, or as you said, Mr. Ravish, you gave the example, he is very successful. He has become independent of Trendy TV. So now he is, anti-establishment person. So people and the audience, as a viewer, as a listener, as a, layman or common man, I am also, the people also like to hear, they are also biased and prejudiced as the journalists. So the facts are getting diluted, and the journalists, their opinions are replacing the facts. So they are not able to balance the facts with their opinions. So the viewer or the listener, they also want to listen to whatever their own personal prejudices and biases are there. So either so my question is, they either follow this way or that way. There is no, neutral space. You are either this way, black and white. There is no gray space to discuss. And as you say that about what about re? And journalists, they say that journalist role is to ask the questions. But when you ask the question, there is an assumption. So you are also biased and prejudiced.
Okay, we'll take three questions together, and so that we can finish. Paranjoy wanted to ask one question. We'll keep this question in mind. Paranjoy and maybe one. Okay. We'll just take two more questions after this. This one and Paranjoy after this, please.
Yeah. Hi, Mr. Shankar. My name is Udit. I'm a journalist with ThePrint. We've spoken a lot about how technology has changed, the quality of content, journalism organizations. But I wanted to ask you a question about consumer tastes and preferences. That has also kind of evolved over time. Consumers were earlier primarily looking at movies, and then it became YouTube videos, and now it's become 10-second reels. And journalism, by nature, the innate ability is kind of explaining issues, or helping people understand. So what I wanted to ask you was, and I know that innovation is required to kind of drive that content, but do you feel, could you maybe talk a bit more about how that aligns with shifting consumer tastes and preferences in this kind of attention-driven economy, and how that works with journalism?
So look, two things. First of all, consumer tastes and preferences have never been static. They will, as the society evolves, as people evolve, they change. And the other thing is, we cannot not take into account the content provider's role in shaping those tastes. If you start giving entertainment news, Bollywood news, and if you keep upping the volume of Bollywood news, over a period of time, people will start consuming Bollywood news and it will shape the taste. And then you can't come back and complain that, oh, people are not interested in serious issues. So there is that part. The other thing is formats have always changed, So if people want short news, I mean, first of all, I don't buy that it's only 10-second reels that people watch. It's also the most glorious time for very long format podcasts. There has never been a time in history that people have spent so much time consuming podcasts. There is a lot of long form journalism, including the long form journalism that he does. It's still, is accessible to a smaller group, and by definition, it requires deeper engagement, greater intellectual commitment to do that. But people are consuming that, and people are consuming shorter formats. So I think there is an opportunity in that diversity rather than lament that everybody is consuming 10-second reels.
Okay, last question, Paranjoy.
Yeah. Uday, I just came across a meme a few minutes before I came to this event. It's by the Desh Bhakt, also known as Akash Banerjee. There are 6 pictures. He's a journalist, a comedian. There are 6 pictures. There are 3 pictures at the top, that of Kunal Kamra, Shyam Rangila, and Veer Das. And there are 3 pictures at the bottom, Amish Devgan, Arnab Goswami, and Sudhir Chaudhary. And the caption reads, and I'd like your comment on this, people now take comedians seriously and journalists as a joke.
Look, there's nothing for me to comment here, but comedians have always been taken seriously and journalists have also been taken seriously. I think, that's how it's always been. And, I think there is place for both.
Okay, I think.
Journalists were never so divided even 50 years earlier. And certainly 50 years earlier, they had a pedestal. And while I don't have the mic, but while I'm shouting, we also ask your question. You quite correctly praised India Today and Mr. Puri, who's so happily with us, for what he did at the time that he gave you lots of head rain. The same organization, the same person is today giving head rain, lots of space to personalities such as the one he mentioned.
Sir, that's not a question for me to answer. I'm in no position to answer that. All I can tell you is that Mr. Puri gave me a lot of space. I did some very good work, and I got appreciation from him, and I learned a lot from him. He is truly one of the people who has shaped my way of looking at the world and the business of media. And I'm enormously grateful to him and the platform that he provided to me. And I found him to be, just as an aside, always one of the most honorable people that I have dealt with. In all those years that I ran, or I was at the helm of one of the most powerful media vehicles in the country, I never got a message from him to dilute something or change my position. After that, I'm just a consumer of the content.
Okay. Can I? Is there anything that we want to?
There is always space. There is no space. Space has to be created, sir. You have to create something that people will consume. And if they like it, they will consume. And all I'm saying today is that while there is a lot of content and a lot of content providers, the distribution of content has become easiest that ever was. You can really create content sitting in a remote village in the Himalayas and distribute it to the farthest parts of the world.
Can I thank you there? Can I invite Prasad, KV Prasad, former associate editor, Tribune, and treasurer of the Guild, to give a thank you note.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Deshankar. I certainly would say you gave us a lot of thoughts, and that has provoked many in this room and also many who are watching us live on Facebook. Certainly, I would like to say one thing from my personal side, having transited from a print journalism when we started In fact, our organization, I joined the PTI, which was the first organization which computerized the news operations. And we went paperless way back in '85. And one of the advantages we as trainees had, the seniors taught us more because they didn't know how to operate the computers. So we were the beneficiaries of that. We got trained by hardcore professionals to edit a copy much faster. Of course, we've transited from the line of print to the dominance of electronic media, and now all of us have arrived in the new media system. So we have made this transition. But certainly one point is, which came in very strongly from what he said, there is us versus they. Us as in journalists and they as in the business models. And somewhere down the line, I do realize that having worked in some of the prestigious organizations, there were walls, and the walls had either to be broken by the management or we had to do our job at the end of the day. So I think some of the thoughts I carried from your lecture was that, but surely this is a very engaging evening. And thank the Editors Guild President Anant Nath, the executive members who are here personally. Rajdeep is there, Ashos, and Mr. Raj Chenkappa, the former president, Alok Mehta ji is here. And many of us have joined online because for various reasons, they are watching from different parts of the country. And I'm sure there will be more thoughts and more questions as we go along. Thank you very much. Thank you for everybody.